Imagine being a soldier in the Roman Empire, risking your life on the frontiers for a modest salary. Now, imagine spending 40 years of that hard-earned pay on a single pound of thread. It sounds insane, but that was the reality of ancient Rome's most desired luxury good. That thread was silk, a substance so magical and expensive it was said to be worth its weight in gold. But silk was just one part of a global shopping spree that consumed the Roman elite. They also craved pungent spices that came from mythical lands and terrifying beasts captured from the farthest corners of the earth to die in the Colosseum. Welcome to 10-Minute History. I'm your host, Jake Sullivan, and today we're exploring how Rome's hunger for exotic imports created the ancient world's most extensive trade network, a system that drained the empire's treasury, reshaped its culture, and connected civilizations thousands of miles apart. Rome's insatiable appetite for foreign luxuries didn't appear out of nowhere. It was built on foundations laid centuries earlier. The conquests of Alexander the Great first shattered the barriers between the Mediterranean and the heart of Asia, creating a common Greek-speaking culture that helped trade. But it was the rise of Rome that threw the doors wide open. The famous Pax Romana, or Roman peace, established a massive, unified market that stretched from Scotland to Syria. A single currency, a single legal system, and seas swept clean of pirates made long-distance commerce safer and more reliable than ever before. The real game-changer, however, was Rome's conquest of Egypt in 30 BCE. Suddenly, the emperor had direct control over the gateway to the Indian Ocean. This put the full power of the Roman state behind the sea routes to the east. The final key was not a conquest, but a piece of knowledge, a mastery of the Indian Ocean's monsoon winds. Around the 1st century CE, sailors, perhaps led by a navigator named Hippolus, figured out that they could use the powerful summer monsoon to sail directly across the open ocean to India in about 40 days. They could then use the winter monsoon to make a swift return journey. This discovery revolutionized maritime trade, cutting travel time from years to less than one. The stage was set for a flood of exotic goods to pour into the Roman world, and nothing was more desired than silk. To the Romans, silk was a complete mystery. The historian Pliny the Elder guessed that it was a fluffy substance combed from the leaves of trees in a faraway land he called Cyrrhus, the land of the silk people. The reality was even more fantastic, and it was one of history's most closely guarded state secrets. Silk is a protein fiber produced by the larva of the domesticated silkworm. The entire process, called sericulture, was a form of ancient biotechnology perfected in China. It involved cultivating vast orchards of mulberry trees, carefully raising the worms as they ate constantly for a month, and then harvesting their cocoons. To get a single, unbroken thread up to 900 meters long, the pupa inside had to be killed by steaming it. The filaments from several cocoons were then reeled together to create the thread that would be woven into the shimmering, otherworldly fabric that captivated Rome. China's monopoly on this process was absolute and enforced under penalty of death. For the entire life of the Roman Empire, the secret held fast. The journey of that silk to Rome was a brutal 4,000-mile trek along the network of trails we call the Silk Road. A bolt of silk fabric would be passed through a long chain of hands, and its price would increase at every step. Leaving the Chinese capital, caravans would cross the terrifying Taklamakan Desert, a place whose name means, "You go in but you don't come out," hopping between vital oasis cities. From there, they climbed over the Pamir Mountains, the roof of the world, before descending into Central Asia. The crucial middlemen in this trade were two of Rome's great rivals. First were the Kushans, whose empire in modern-day Afghanistan sat at the crossroads of Central and South Asia. They controlled the junction between the overland route from China and the sea routes from India, growing fabulously wealthy by taxing the trade. The final gatekeepers were the Parthians, whose empire in Persia controlled the last leg of the journey to the Roman frontier. The Parthians were Rome's geopolitical enemies, and they knew exactly how much the Romans wanted silk. They bought it from Kushan traders and sold it to Roman merchants at a massive markup, using the profits paid in Roman silver to fund their wars against Rome. This unreliability and high cost was a major reason why Rome was so eager to develop its sea routes. When silk finally arrived in Rome, it caused a cultural earthquake. The light, translucent, body-hugging fabric was scandalous to conservative Romans, who were used to heavy wool togas. The philosopher Seneca the Younger raged against it, writing that silk couldn't even be called clothing, as it did not hide the body or even a woman's decency. In the year 14 CE, the Emperor Tiberius actually passed laws forbidding men from wearing silk, but the demand was too great and the laws were simply ignored. The economic cost was just as shocking. Pliny complained that the trade with the East drained 100 million sesterces from the empire every year. That was an astronomical sum. Archaeology backs this up, with huge hoards of Roman gold and silver coins found all along the trade routes, especially in India. Rome was literally bleeding treasure to pay for its fashion. If silk was the site of Roman luxury, spices were its taste and smell. The king of all spices was pepper. It came from the Malabar coast of southwestern India, and it was everywhere in the kitchens of the rich. The famous Roman cookbook of Apicius features pepper in over 80% of its recipes, used in everything from roasted flamingo to spiced wine. In fact, when the Goths sacked Rome in 410 CE, part of the ransom they demanded was 3,000 pounds of pepper, showing just how valuable it was. Other spices were even more mysterious. For centuries, Romans believed fantastical stories about cinnamon, claiming that giant birds built nests from it on mountain cliffs. These tales were lies spread by Arabian traders to protect their monopoly. The true source of high-quality cinnamon was Sri Lanka, and for even rarer spices like cloves and nutmeg, the source was a place completely unknown to the Romans, the Spice Islands of modern-day Indonesia. These spices traveled through an incredibly long chain of traders, making them fantastically expensive. But the Romans did have a direct line to Indian pepper, thanks to the Monsoon sea route. The entire operation was a logistical masterpiece. Roman ships would leave Egyptian ports on the Red Sea in July, catch the monsoon, and arrive at the Indian port of Maziris about 40 days later. There, they would trade Roman wine, glass, and gold and silver coins for huge quantities of pepper, pearls, and gemstones. We have incredible proof of this in a 2nd century document known as the Maziris Papyrus. It's a loan agreement for a single ship's cargo from India, listing 150 tons of pepper and 50 tons of aromatic leaves, with the total cargo valued at 7 million sesterces. After trading for several months, the ships would catch the winter monsoon back to Egypt. The spices were then hauled by camel caravan across the desert to the Nile River, floated to Alexandria for taxation, and finally shipped across the Mediterranean to Rome. The spice trade had a huge impact on Roman life. The heavy use of spices was a way to show off wealth at dinner parties. Spices were also essential in medicine, used to balance the body's humors and treat illnesses. And they were central to religion and death. The smoke of frankincense and myrrh brought from Arabia filled every temple. And after his wife Poppaea died, Emperor Nero famously burned an entire year's supply of cinnamon at her funeral, an act of almost insane extravagance. Beyond silken spices, the Romans imported something else from the wild frontiers: living, breathing, terrifying animals. This trade was driven by the public games, specifically the Venationes or wild animal hunts, held in arenas like the Colosseum. These bloody spectacles, where beasts were hunted by trained fighters or pitted against each other, were a form of mass entertainment and political propaganda. The bigger and more exotic the animals, the more popular the politician or emperor who staged the show. The list of imported animals reads like a fantasy menagerie. Elephants were brought from North Africa and India. Lions and leopards were captured in Syria and North Africa on an industrial scale. The dictator Sulla showed 100 lions in 93 BCE, while Pompey the Great displayed nearly 600. But the ultimate status symbol was the tiger. Coming from distant India, the tiger was a creature of myth, seen as faster and more ferocious than a lion. Their appearance in the Colosseum, almost exclusively arranged by emperors, was a sensation. Other wonders included the rhinoceros, whose horn was said to be able to toss a bull in the air, and the giraffe, which the Romans called a, quote, camelopard, thinking it was a cross between a camel and a leopard. Getting these animals to Rome was a logistical nightmare. They were caught in pit traps or lured into cages, then transported thousands of miles in crates. Mortality rates were incredibly high. The cost of transport often exceeded the animal's purchase price many times over. The Colosseum itself was an engineering marvel designed for this spectacle. Beneath the arena floor was a two-story maze of tunnels and pens called the hypogeum. A complex system of elevators and trapdoors could lift caged animals directly into the arena, allowing a lion or a bear to suddenly appear in the middle of a gladiator fight. The sheer scale is hard to comprehend. In 107 CE, the games held by Emperor Trajan lasted for 123 days and involved the killing of 11,000 animals. This relentless demand had a devastating and permanent consequence. It was one of history's first examples of human activity causing mass extinctions. The North African elephant was hunted to oblivion. The Barbary lion, which once roamed all of North Africa, was wiped out. The Roman Empire effectively strip-mined the animal populations of its world to fuel its bloody entertainment. So what can we take away from Rome's obsession with the exotic? This vast trade network was far more than a luxury shopping trip. It was a system that created immense wealth for merchants but also caused a severe trade imbalance, draining gold and silver from the empire. It fostered diplomatic contact with faraway empires in India and China, but it also fueled geopolitical rivalry with the Parthians. And it sparked intense debates within Rome about morality, wealth, and identity. Ultimately, by importing the most precious, rare, and dangerous things from the ends of the earth, Rome was performing its own power. Consuming the world was a way of proving it was the center of the world. The desire for a soft fabric, a pungent berry, and a terrifying beast connected civilizations redrew the map of global trade and left a legacy of economic, cultural, and ecological change that we can still see today. So what are your thoughts on this? Let us know down in the comments below. If you found this interesting or learned something new, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to 10-Minute History for more deep dives. Thanks for listening.